Good morning. I know we're running a day late, and I'm sorry. Sometimes I have to do makeup sessions because things that are beyond my control interfere with our daily devotional time. But I appreciate your patience and perseverance. Those of you who still watch, and if you're not still watching, that's okay. Maybe sometime in the future somebody will come across this. I have often come across videos that are 10, 15 years old that have been uploaded that have made an impact on me. So we're not going to give up. We're not going to quit, but we definitely are discouraged by the numbers. It's, you know what, the Lord can use it. That's His will, and if not, that's okay. We're enjoying the look at it. So, Brother Chad Long, Delhi Baptist Church, do forgive me the Farmer John look today. Well, it's Saturday and I had some work to do, and I didn't want to change twice. Sometimes I'll make a point to put on a nice shirt for the video and then change, but I just didn't take the time this morning, so you'll forgive me. Besides, overalls are one of the most comfortable things ever invented. I don't care who you are, that's true. They're just comfortable to wear. When I was growing up, it was real common. In this day and age, not so much. I don't see them as often as I used to. But that's all beside the point. We are looking at Jesus as our high priest, called after the order of Melchizedek. And when you look at, when you look at the first 5 verses of chapter 5, you'll see that every man that's ever been high priest was called of God and fit into a particular mold. Now, that's not true of all believers, because God calls people and uses them for a variety of functions in a variety of ways from a variety of molds. The Lord can use a donkey, and has, to bring about His will and His word. But when it comes to high priest, that was a lot more specific. And up until Christ, high priest was specifically out of Aaron, Levi, and then later Aaron, and then later Zadok, which are all out of Levi, but just narrowing it down to a more narrow bloodline. The tribe of Judah, however, had foretold the coming of the Messiah, who replaces the high priest and fulfills his role eternally. The Levirate, the Aaronite, Zadokite, whatever you want to call it, high priest, could never fulfill this role in the way that Christ did. It was something they could only do once a year with all the right conditions and only as God directed. So with Christ, He has fulfilled the role forever and ever and ever. So we read, and I'll pick up in verse 5. We read the first 5 verses. In fact, let's look at verse 4. No man taketh this honor unto himself, but he that is called of God, as was Aaron. You have to be called of God to fulfill this role, and Christ was, and he makes that point. Verse 5, he says, So also Christ glorified not himself to be made an high priest, but he that saith unto him, Thou art my son, today have I begotten thee. Now, what that's saying in layman's terms is that Jesus never called himself high priest. And He didn't come acting like one, or making claims to be one, or making claims to even be eligible to be one. He let God do that. What He did, though, was humble Himself, fulfill all of the law, every jot and tittle. For them that don't know, jot and tittle is the Hebrew expression for what we do with our letters, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. When I say dot every I, cross every T, perfect grammar to make sure you don't miss any of those little steps. To the average person, you wouldn't care if you send me a letter. Don't, but if you do, if you don't dot an I or cross a T, I'm not going to get upset about that. But if you were turning it in for work in a college level program, well, they would dock you for that. When Jesus fulfilled every jot and tittle of the law, in other words, He crossed every T, He dotted every I, He fulfilled everything. People think He abolished the law. He didn't abolish it. He fulfilled it. Same is true with the high priestly order. He didn't abolish it. He fulfilled it. He is our high priest. So anyway, so Christ never glorified Himself. to be made high priest. But he that said unto him, in other words, thou art my son, today have I begotten thee, is quoting scripture, I believe, also from Psalm 95. But I'm not sure because I didn't make a note. But I know that's quoting scripture. And it was God who said, you are my son, today have I begotten thee. And he says something very similar at his baptism also. In all four of the Gospels this is recorded. So just know that this is a reference to God calling Jesus. God saying, you are the one. You're the one I've ordained. You're the one I've called. You are me, but you're me incarnate. So anyway, my son, rather. Verse 6, or he's both. As he saith also in another place, and this is Paul quoting more scripture here, thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And I thought for sure I had a reference to that. I think we've mentioned it before. Where did I see that before? I'm not going to worry about it right now, but I know, and you can look that up, you can Google it. But that is a reference to scripture as well. Also, I believe in the Psalms. Verse 7, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears. Remember, this is Jesus that we're talking about. And the strong crying and tears was not just in the Garden of Gethsemane, not just when he cried, or when he was sweating blood, sweat drops of blood. But he cried and he just exerted himself in prayer and intercession. And so that's what this is talking about. Who in the days of his flesh, meaning while he was alive. Now, he's still alive, but you know what I mean. When he was walking the planet. When he had offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears unto him, God, that was able to save him from death and was heard, and that he feared. In other words, it's talking about his piety. In that he feared means he feared God. He honored God. He spoke to God. And he had a relationship with God. Well, his entire earthly ministry is a picture of high priestly work. What he was doing in those, and I would even argue before he was an adult, but you know, for this particular reference, let's just talk about as his adulthood, he enters into his ministry, and throughout his ministry, as the whole thing was high priestly work. It was for everyone but himself. It was all done for the sick and afflicted and lost. Anyway, verse 8, though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered. Son here is capitalized because what it means is, though he is the epitome of God on earth, he's the son of God, but they're only calling him that because he was born. He's God anyway. He is, he always has been, he always will be. But in his fleshly form, it was easier, I guess, for us to understand the word son. But son of God just meant incarnated flesh of God. That's all it meant. Like my son's incarnated flesh of me, I guess, but not in the same way. He and I are still two different individuals. God is one being in three parts. Anyway, though he were a son, and here it's capitalized because it means, it should say the son, I think. Yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered. All that he went through taught him how to obey God better. And I think we grow better under persecution and suffering. And if you need a theme for this section, let it be that we grow more and learn more about God in the hard times than we do the good. Everybody wants to have the mountaintop experience. Everybody wants to have good things going for them all the time. Everybody wants to be able to have a smile from ear to ear all the time. You know, we want that all the time. And understandably so. That's not what's doing us the best good. It doesn't build any character. You don't learn when you're smiling from ear to ear. Not really. That's not fun to talk about. But even when I was in sports, we had a slogan on the wall that said, "No pain, no gain." If you don't make an investment, if you don't put something out there, if you don't have any flesh in the game, then you don't benefit, is the point. Anyway, as he learned to obedience, he learned obedience as he suffered. Verse 9. And being made perfect. Now, don't misunderstand this. Don't misunderstand this at all. God was perfect the day he started. Okay. But there was a process involved. God has always been completely perfect and complete. But what this is referencing is the completion of it, meaning having been completed, having been done, having been perfected, having been finished. You could say with anybody else, you could say work in progress, work in progress, work in progress. But we'll never finish. We'll never be complete until we're with Him. Jesus, on the other hand, was already perfect. But I think this is a reference to what He's doing and to the work that He's doing. It couldn't be made complete and perfect in a day. He had to work His way to Calvary. And so anyway, being made perfect here is just a reference to Him being made complete, to Him having finished His work and doing what He came here to do. He became the author of eternal salvation unto all them that obey Him. Now, you'll have people that have a problem with that statement because they'll say, wait a minute, I thought it was by faith. Now it's by obedience. Obedience is a byproduct of faith. Okay, I believe my parents. That's why I obeyed them. I believe God. That's why I obey Him. So to say it that way doesn't change the text any. But you'll find people that'll pull that one statement out and have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with it. He's the author of eternal salvation to all them that obey Him. Their obedience is evidence of their faith. Their faith is what saves them. So anyway, you can dispute me if you want to, but I would reference you to Ephesians 2:8-9. I'm not going to argue about it. Verse 10. Called of God and high priest after the order of Melchizedek, of whom we have seen many things to say and hard to be uttered, seeing you're dull of hearing. Now, we're not going to get into that section today, but I wanted to leave with it because I want to show you, first of all, verse 10, God's the one who called him a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And it's God who called him and ordained him and recognized him for who he is long before we even began to understand it. Verse 11, though, he shifts gears. And he says, we've got a lot to say about this guy, but you're not listening because you're full of hearing. In other words, you're not prepared to understand these things until you first recognize that there's something to understand. Full of hearing means you think you know. It's just another way of saying you're know-it-alls. You think you know more than everybody else and you're not willing to listen. This gives me more evidence to something I alluded to earlier, about who this letter is directed to. Yes, it's directed to Jewish believers, but I don't think everybody in that group had fully made their profession of faith. I don't want to get back into that now, but anyway, we're going to review some more of this Monday, but I wanted to at least catch up from the week and give you something to consider for the weekend, and just remember that you learn best by suffering, and that Jesus himself understood that. That's why he suffered for us, and that the closer that you draw to him, the more you'll understand what it is we need to do as his servants. That's really as far as I can go with this, but he was called, he was qualified, and he always was. They say God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. Well, starting with his own son, he performs these things in those that he uses. So we need to draw into him, we need to follow his example, and we need to be willing to suffer for his sake and to learn obedience. All right, that's all for today. God bless you. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you, Lord willing, in church or Monday.